but I just really like a well-designed app, especially one that's fairly easy to use. And I wouldn't say this is like easy to use in every way, but it's easy to get started with. And then the more you learn about it and practice with it, the more complicated things you'll eventually figure out how to use it for. So I want to try to present this in a way that if you've already used the app, you'll hopefully learn some of the ways to use it. And if you've never used it, you'll really get inspired to try this nice app. So my name is Anna Maria Johnson. My daytime job is I teach writing here at James Madison University. But in my free time, I volunteer with the Virginia Master Naturalists in the Headwaters Chapter. You know, we have at least one other member here and who's part of that chapter. And then my interests in the natural world, natural history, drew me more specifically to plants. So I became involved with the Native Plant Society. So that's how I got here today. And here's just my organizational affiliations here. So I'm a certified Virginia Master Naturalist, which means that I completed a year-long training program sponsored through the state of Virginia. And it's meant to educate the public so that when people want to volunteer, they kind of know what they're doing. And it's also a good way to provide public education. So people in this organization receive training and then share their knowledge in various formats, whether it's through just invasive plant removal, bluebird monitoring, helping bats, or in my case, plants. And then the Edith J. Carrier Arboretum has been a really great partner to work with. It's a great place to volunteer because there's lots of plants here, and there's it's organized, so there's ways to plug in and become connected. And as an educational institution, this is a great place to present programs and things like that. So I want to thank Ivy, she just went out, for inviting me to present today. She's also part of the Shenandoah Chapter Native Plant Society with me. So my volunteer work with native plants drew me to the Native Plant Society, which has its mission conserving wildflowers and wild places. So I love gardening. That's not wild so much, right? And so this is kind of shifting from like my love of gardening, made me interested in plants as they occur in the wild. And this is a good organization for learning about those. When I learned that our local chapter had gone dormant a few years ago, I thought that was really sad, and so I tried to find some other people who liked plants so that we could revive our local chapter. And we did. So this is now our second year of having the Shenandoah Chapter active again. And if you like this presentation, if you like plants, I would love for you to join our organization. You can commit nothing to it, or you can commit a lot to it, whatever you want. We have walks, activities, plant sales, and today we have free stickers, so I'm using these to promote. Make sure you get one if you came in late. Did you get one? Sticker? Anyone else not have a sticker yet? So this is just so you can remember our organization, and if you ever want to be in touch, you can reach me at shenandoahchapter@gmail.com. And that's a good way to find out what we're doing. So before I get into things, I just wanted to get a quick little background on what you know already. How many of you have previous experience with botany? We're going to say any. Let's say any. Okay, so like half of you. How about intermediate levels of botany? 3? Okay. And who's like got pretty significant experience with botany? Like maybe you have, yes. If you work here, you probably do, yes. Okay, that's great. So a lot of you feel like you're still in the beginner level, which is great because I don't have a PhD, so that's making me feel comfortable. And then my next question is, have you ever used a print guide or an app to identify plants? Okay, almost everyone has. What have you used, what are some of your go-to apps or books that you have used to identify plants? And?
The phone on iNaturalist.
Oh, iNaturalist, okay. So you just use your phone, take a picture. So you don't have to do the dichotomous keys, right? You just take a picture and then it tells
And
you
then it
using artificial.
Sort, maybe.
Sort of maybe, yeah. Probably close. Sort of maybe sometimes. Raise your hand if you're in that camp also, that like using a photo, like your phone to ID plants is basically what you do. Okay. Is there anyone who has used like an official dichotomous key where you read like, does it have this or that? Okay, so 3 of you, 4 of you. Okay, so this app is, you can use it in lots of ways. If you're used to just using your phone to use a picture, you'll find this a little bit intimidating at first. This is a little more advanced. But what I like to do as an intermediate person is use my phone app, like you all do, and then I'll look up what it tells me in the Flora app and see if it's correct. So this is kind of like if you're not sure to trust the artificial intelligence, or you know what the plant is, but you don't know very much information about the plant, and you want something a little more in-depth or reliable than, say, Wikipedia, which again, I have nothing against Wikipedia, it's awesome. It's just like not necessarily the most expert, and so this is kind of like, it'll help you level up your game. Like if you're playing a video game and you're on level 1 with plants, this is gonna help you like take it to the next level. How many of you already have the Flora of Virginia app on your phone? Okay, so only 2 of you. So that's really cool because I get to spread the love of this app with you today. And it'll help me to know how to tailor my talk. So what we're going to cover is what is the Flora of Virginia project and the app in particular. We're going to cover about 5 things you can do with this app. There are lots more than 5 things, but I think that's enough for our 1-hour presentation. And I'll also give a little preview of things you can teach yourself later. Then we'll look at one example of someone else who has used the app. This is a colleague of mine from the Virginia Master Naturalist named Judy, and she gave me permission to share the homework she created for herself to learn more with the app. I'm a teacher, and so one of the things my students say is helpful is showing them another example of someone who's done the assignment. So this isn't how you have to use it, but it's just an example that you can take with you of someone who has used the app to learn new things. And then my last plan had been to practice outside, but because it's so hot, you don't have to do that part. I brought in some plants we can look at in the refreshing air conditioning if you want to. So we'll see how chilly or warm we are then. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is just introduce you to the app. So the Flora of Virginia is a project that's been going on for several hundred years, ever since, probably longer. So people have been looking at plants in this region for, we don't even know how long, thousands or maybe 1,000,000 years. However long people have been, I guess people haven't been here 1,000,000 years, but however long, obviously I'm not a geologist, people have been here, we've been learning about plants. And once people got into things like studying the world in a scientific way in the 1600s, they began to take notes on plants and write them down. And then over the years, people tried to create some kind of documentation. So there was a book published in the 1700s, and then it was pretty good for the time. And then people felt by 2000 that it needed to be updated, right? So a committee formed, they called themselves the Flora of Virginia Project, and they built on all the knowledge that had been collected that was available in history up until the year 2000, and they made this book. It took them 10 years. So this book was published in about 2010, I believe. 2012 actually, so it took them a little over 10 years. But I don't know about you, but I find a book this big hard to carry around with me. So around that time they decided, you know what if we made an app? Because everyone makes apps now. So they made an app that has everything in here, and you can just carry it around on your phone, in your pocket, for the low price of $20. And you just pay it one time, and you can have the app for the rest of your life. So that's why I think it's a pretty good deal. You don't have to do a monthly subscription or anything to it. And then they update it too. So a book like this, once it's printed, it just kind of stays, right? But plant science is developing all the time. So the advantage of the app is every few years they'll update the content to match what's known. So plant names change sometimes, or we just find out new information. And so in 2020, there was a very extensive update to the app. And then in 2023, they added some more new content. So since I've had this app, I paid my $20, and it's been updated twice, compared to this book, which I believe is like $90. So that's, I do like print books, not gonna lie. I do look at this book, but I use this quite a bit more. So you don't have to buy this book, no pressure, or this app, no pressure. But if you get to the end of the presentation and you want to, that'll be fine. I don't get a commission or anything. I'm like a salesperson. But you can see it's got things in it. It's got photos, which this book doesn't have. It has new data, more illustrations, range maps that show where the plant is distributed. And it also has a graphic key, which can't be put into a book. So that's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do next is, well, I'll show you the website. This is where you can, oh, look how pretty that is, the shadow. So you can learn more about the Flora of Virginia project by going to their website, floraofvirginia.org. And then this other link is how I got involved. They have an ambassador program where they're trying to train people how to use the app more effectively. I took an 8-hour course in how to do more things with the app. And then the last item to gain my certificate is to present with at least 6 people. So you're helping me reach that last step. All right, so what I'm going to show you, I can do from my phone. I just have to put on hearing. There it is. And if you have the app already, you may look it up on your phone, follow along. If you don't, you can just watch on the screen. So I have a folder on my phone with all my favorite nature apps. Seek is a really good one if you like to identify plants with photos. So I use that if I don't know what something is. That helps me get at least to the right family, maybe the right genus of the plant. And then I can use the Flora app second to get a more accurate ID. And then Merlin, that's not relevant, but if you want to learn bird calls, I recommend that out too. So I go to this app. Let's go to the home page first. Okay. So when you first open up the app, it'll look something like this. And the first 3 years that I had this app, I only basically used the top category because that's all I just felt like I needed to use it for. So I would look up a plant, find out about it through Seek, then I would look it up here to learn more details. And so it's almost like having the white turtle head brochure, but for any plant that's in a wild area in Virginia. I should mention it's not going to have all the cultivated plants. So if you go out to your garden and you find a rose, it's not going to tell you that. This is more about wild plants. And if it's a wild plant that happens to be in your garden, it will be in there. But it's not really meant for gardening as much as talk about natural areas. So let's just look at an example. Does anyone have a favorite wild plant that you know the name of?
Bergamot.
Bergamot. Okay, so I'm going to put that in, and you can put in the common name or the Latin or botanical name, either one, and I click search. And so you said bergamot. There's actually a lot of them. Isn't that exciting? When you said bergamot, which one were you thinking of?
I won't even try to pronounce it, the kind of lavender one that's shot from a bird's eye view, yeah.
That one? Yeah, Monarda fistulosa. And so this is fun because you might think, oh, I love Monarda or I love bergamot, and you might not know there's actually lots of them, and you could learn about more of them. But let's look at the one you were thinking about. This helps us, if we know the Latin or botanical name, it helps us to distinguish which bergamot we're talking about. And it tells us that it's in the mint family. So that's interesting, isn't it? Plants in the mint family don't always smell like mint, but they do have squarish stems, and if you roll the stem in your fingers, you'll feel that square thing. So if you're trying to identify a plant and you feel that square shape on the stem, you know it's probably in the mint family. And then we can scroll down a little bit more. There's some photos, which can help us feel reassured that we've got the correct plant we were thinking of. And then we also have a scientific illustration here. And it's nice because sometimes plants just don't look like their photos, right? And so as someone who has an experience with botanical drawings, we'll draw it like showing the scale, showing the important features like how the veins in the leaves are supposed to look, the shape of the flower, and that helps us know that we've got the right thing. And then down here, it says description. So I'm going to tap on the description, and this gives us more information than you could ever dream about the plant. And when I started using this app, I would just ignore all this stuff here because it has all these scientific terms that I didn't understand. But now, in the book, that was the case. But now in the app, what's nice is all these words that are in blue are attached to a glossary. So you can actually look up any of those words. But you still might not want to just because there might be 10 or 15 words you don't know. So if you're a beginner, just feel free to scroll right past that. Nothing bad will happen to you if you skip over sections. If you're more advanced, like 3 of you who had your hand up, you can read these parts. And then phenology, that tells you just when you can see the plant, right? So if there's just one date range, it probably means when it's blooming. And if there's 2 ranges, this is showing us when it's in bloom, and then when it goes to seeds or fruits. So does that seem right for bergamot, June to September? Which is why a lot of us like it, right? It stays blooming a long time, and that provides pollen and nectar for a long time for the critters, and it's nice for, sorry, I shouldn't say critters, my husband he's like, they're not critters, they're creatures. And then we like them too. And then if you want to know where would you find it just naturally? That's the habitat information. So it says mesic to more often dry upland forests, rocky woodlands, clearings, old fields, forest edges, meadows, and roadsides. Saving electricity. You don't want to do that right now. Maybe I have to tell it to mirror again. Yes. Perfect. Okay. Back to the app. There we go. Okay. Moderately to strongly base-rich soils. It's common in the mountains, frequent in the Piedmont, that's like the center of Virginia, rare in the coastal plain. So there's lots of normal words in here, and then a few maybe more intimidating words. You can look up words like mesic in the glossary function of this app, which I'll show you in a minute. And then you could also, if you have a little more knowledge, you'll know what base rich means. That means soils that are not very acidic. They tend to be soils where there's limestone, which is very much the case in the valley here. So this would be a good plant that you're likely to see around here. And then sometimes the plants will have extra information here. And it's up to you how deep you want to get into that. If you're a beginner, you can feel free to skip right over it. If you are like a little more on the nerdy side or you have a lot of free time, you can read it more in detail. And it explains like, okay, there's not just one species of this, there's different varieties or subspecies of this one, and you can see like the hot debates going on in botany about how they should be organized and categorized, and you know that plant nerds have been writing papers about whether these should be counted as different varieties or the same varieties. And so this information is for people who wish to explore more about that. But I'm guessing probably most of the people in this room don't, maybe you don't need to hear all that, sorry. So let me keep going. There's a bunch more about the details of the Latin names. I encourage you to skip over this as well. And then you've got search characteristics. So if we had gotten to this plant using a graphic key instead of just going straight to the name, these are the keys we would have put in order to get to this plant. And it just tells us some more details. And it's actually, if you wanted to take a wild plant and grow one like it in your home garden, it would tell you what that plant really needs. Or if you just wanted to know what kind of place in nature do I need to get to if I want to see this plant. So this is, it can handle moist or dry, which is nice. It can have a range of light, which is also nice. This tells us it's a native plant, because not all the plants found in the wild are native. Some of them are introduced or even invasive. And this will always tell you whether the plant is, sorry, if I move my hand, my phone just like gets excited. Okay. Erect just tells you that it grows straight up. If you've seen this plant, I don't have one here, but it just does, it grows straight up. Some other options for that are like things that crawl along the ground, creeping. You could also have woody plants, those that have like a strong stem that persists through the winter. And then like, this means that the stem is a little bit hairy, or the plant is a little bit hairy. The leaves they grow straight across from each other instead of being alternate. This tells us the leaf shape approximately. People might describe the leaf in more than one way. It's got, kind of serrated edges here. The flower is irregular. It doesn't look like a daisy or something like that. And then these are the colors. So that's all information that you can glean from using this. And then down here, range map. This is one of the really fun things to look up. It tells you where people have found it in the wild, and they have proof. So anytime you see a red dot, that means they believe it's native, and it's been documented. Somebody collected a specimen and sent it to an herbarium, and they have proof that that plant has been found in that county. If there's no dot, does it mean that the plant isn't in that county? No, not necessarily. It just means nobody has documented that it's there. So a plant like this, when you see that it can be found in a lot of the state, that lets you know it's possible you might see it in these adjacent counties also. It's just that nobody has collected the specimen and sent it to the herbarium to record it. But it also is more common along this part of Virginia, and it's not as common in the coast. So you probably wouldn't expect to find it along the coastal plain. If there were blue dots, that would mean you can find it there, but people put it there. And then if there's a gray dot, they're just not sure whether people put it there or it was found naturally. And that's called the distribution data. So if you're really into native plants and wanting to garden with native plants, this is a resource you can use to determine whether that plant is like probably going to belong well and grow well and provide ecological benefits in that site. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
All right, so what else are we supposed to talk about? Don't want to lose track of my notes. So I'm going to go back and show you some other things. So if you're a total beginner, you can just tune out for a little bit. You don't have to listen to this other stuff, but I just want you to know that down the road, as you get more comfortable with the app, some of these other things are really fun to use. And I'm going to actually go down to the reference library. About is worth pointing out. If you're like, who makes this? I want to know more about that. You can use that. But we're just going to go to reference library and see what resources are there. And this is like a book. So this is like a whole entire book, maybe several books right here on the app. The first is just about the history of botany in Virginia, and it goes all the way back to the early explorers before this was even a state, what people were finding, what they were documenting, what records were collected, what was burned, herbariums that were accidentally burned up in fires, which is really sad to think about, and then how we got to what we know at the present time. And if you're more interested in just like the nature as it is, the second box, The Nature of Virginia Flora, is a really nice resource for just kind of learning more about plants and their environment, how they all fit together. It goes into like how the earth was formed, and that explains why certain plants grow here, what kind of natural communities exist in the present day, and what kind of vegetation we have now. It provides some context. And then you might just skip over some of it and go to the Virgin Valley province, which is where we live, if you want to learn more specifically about plants in their habitat here. But once again, that's like winter reading probably. If you want to go on a field trip and make sure that you're going to see some interesting plants, you can look up hotspots, and that's really cool. So it's organized by region. So say you want to drive but not too far, you might stay within the Virgin Valley, and this tells you what are some really special places you can visit within a couple hours of where we live. So Clinch Mountain Wildlife Management Area, it's further south. The one that's closest to us, where I like to go a lot, is Maple Flats. There's also, of course, George Washington National Forest in Augusta County. It just tells you a little bit about what kind of plants to expect. Here's a place I love to go. So Big Levels, Maple Flats area in Augusta County. There's just really cool sinkhole ponds with plants that grow there that you don't find in other kinds of places. So yeah. So if you're wanting to go on an adventure. If you want to use the app to pick native plants for your home garden, which is very popular right now, it's got instructions for how to use the graphic key to help you figure out what native plants are going to grow well in your yard. So if you have a really dry yard, you're not going to want to put plants that need to be in wet areas, right? So it'll help you narrow down your list of natives to things that are going to grow where you have it. And then it's got like instructions about how to answer the questions so that you end up with a nice little shopping list of the native plants that could be appropriate for you. And then this one, Key to the Families, is nice for people like me who are self-taught. I never took a botany class, but I want to understand more about plants and how they're organized into categories. And so reading this is kind of like a little botany class that helps you understand, you know, those taxonomic categories. And then, of course, those references, you can skip that unless you're doing scholarship. That just wouldn't be something the average person is going to want to read. All right, so that was our reference library. Botanical help is another nice category for when you want to get deeper knowledge about plants. So maybe you're just like, when they describe the shape of flowers, I don't really know what they're talking about. So you might say, I'm going to go with the flower basics. And then they explain, this is what a flower usually looks like. These are the different parts they have. So when they talk about the sepals and the petals, you can use this picture to help understand the difference. Inflorescence means like the shape of the bloom. So if you're not sure whether your plant is a solitary flower, a spike, a raceme, or a panicle, this just kind of helps you understand the vocabulary here. So if you have just a flower on top, a single flower like this, that's a solitary flower. A spike is where the flowers are like growing right off the stem, and then kind of like this one. And then raceme, they're sticking out a little bit. The panicle is, they're sticking out a little bit more, like a I don't know how to explain that. It's got little branches, so phlox flowers, kind of like that. And then this makes me think of like a Queen Anne's lace kind of shape of flower. And there's some more shapes. If you're trying to understand what are the leaf options on these keys, this is how it explains the different, you know, what's the difference between a simple leaf and a compound leaf. So the simple leaf is just, it's got one whole leaf attached there. The compound leaf has little parts that attach to, that are connected by a stem there. The leaves can be arranged in different ways. They can be alternate or opposite or even whorled. So you might have 3 around. And then basal leaves are when they're just like low to the ground and then the stem comes up at the top. And then the edges of leaves are called margins, and they can be smooth or they can undulate. They can be crenate, where it's like, I don't know, like how I used to draw leaves as a kid. Serrate, like little teeth. Doubly serrate, they've got jaggedy teeth, or lobed, like an oak. And then if you want to know more about like plant families, so we know some of our families. Let's say we want to look at, that's a good one. Actually, I mentioned the mint family because we talked about bergamot, right? So if we're like, okay, what makes something a mint? You know, why do we say bergamot is a kind of mint when it doesn't taste the same as other mints? And then this kind of explains, like, okay, throughout the world, there's 230 to 250. This is the genera, this is a plural of genus. I have to think about that in my mind. So there's lots of them throughout the world, and this is what they're like. If a plant meets this description, then it's called a mint. And it gives an example, which some of you might recognize. Okay. So that's a little more in depth there. Another thing I really like to learn about using my app is the natural communities. Because plants aren't just individual plants, they belong in specific communities or groups or settings. And we can learn about what are the different systems that we have throughout the states. We could look at the visual guide, and it gives us a big picture of what kind of systems are out. Terrestrial systems are basically everything that's on land, right? And then there's wetter systems that include wetlands, rivers, estuaries, which we don't really have in the mountain part of Virginia, so more of a coastal thing, and of course marine system, that's also a coastal one. And then if we wanted to get a little more specific, we could go to terrestrial systems. And so basically all of the Ridge and Valley region is mostly land, except for where the rivers are, and we can divide into more specific categories there. We also have riverine systems here. And then if we wanted to get even more specific, the list view shows us, like, these are all the different names that the Department of Conservation Resources has come up with to name the different little regions and communities within our area. And so if you're looking up a plant and you see what kind of community it's found in, you can learn about that community and what else might be with it. All right, dichotomous keys, I think I'm just gonna actually skip this because I feel like with the crowd we have today, it's kind of intimidating to use a dichotomous key at first, and I think it's probably easier to use the graphic key. So the graphic key means it uses pictures. So you can begin, and you start by needing to know, like, what group your plant would be in. Is it a fern? And you can kind of tell by looking at it if it looks like a fern or not, right? Or does it look like a grass? You can tell if it looks kind of grass-like. Or does it look like a wildflower? There's monocots or dicots. And so monocots, the way that you know the difference between a dicot and a monocot is if the flowering parts are in multiples of 3, so it's an odd number, you probably have a monocot, and then there's dicots, which is, this is kind of a complicated explanation, but you can spend more time with it later on determining how to tell if you've got a monocot or a dicot. And a lot of our wildflowers are dicots. They tend to be like the asters and the daisies, those kinds of shapes. But if it's kind of woody, like a shrub or a tree, then you look under the woody plants. So you have to kind of use your own critical thinking to get started and figure it out. But if we're looking at, say we want to look at this, this plant, right? We've got, how would you describe these leaves?
Yes, it around.
Sure, yeah. So we know we've got a wildflower, right? And I'm just going to confirm here, if I think it's a dicot, I can read the characteristics and see if it's right. It's got flowers and fruits grouped in tight, colorful heads, yes. The family can include daisies, goldenrods, pussy toes, sunflowers, cornflowers, among many others. The grouped flowers are held inside a cup-like structure and look for veins that branch or form a net-like pattern. Do we think that we're in the right set so far? Okay, that's good. So we're in the asters. That's the symbol for this. And then you can also turn off or turn on your location. So we are in Rockingham County. We're actually in the city of Harrisonburg, but that's, you know, closest to Rockingham County. So I'm going to keep that on. If you're traveling away from home, you'd want to uncheck that box. And then, did I find it in water, in a wet place, in a moist place, or a dry place? Well, I'll just tell you, I found it here on the property in a sort of like medium moisture place. So I'm going to say moist, where it says soil would usually feel at least slightly moist. Sometimes it's hard to tell when it's a drought on, but I knew it wasn't completely dry, and it definitely wasn't standing in water, so I put something in that ballpark there. And then where I found it, the light regime was, it could have been full sun or part shade, so I might put both of those. I'll just put partial shade. If I don't know already whether it's native or non-native, I can just leave it blank. And I know it's flowering right now, so I've got use current month checked. If it wasn't flowering, I would not choose that, of course. And then some of these other things, I'm not really sure. I wasn't looking close enough to see if it was like a smooth stem or a fuzzy stem. I didn't see any milky sap, so I'm going to say no to that. And then I didn't see any basil leaves. I'm going to say that it's a no. Which of these leaves do you think it has?
I think the first one.
The first one? Okay, so let's go with that. And then the leaf type, is it simple or compact? Right. And then what kind of flowers does it have? Let's just skip that for now unless somebody feels confident about rays versus discs. But we do know the color, right? Yellow. Okay, let's see if this gives us any results. Okay, so we've got some options. We have probably more options than we want to have. What's that? Yeah, it's definitely a goldenrod, one of the goldenrods, right? How many goldenrods are we choosing from? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Actually that's not a goldenrod, so only 13. There's 13 different kinds of goldenrod it could be. So I picked this one partly on purpose because goldenrods are a stumper. They're really hard even for professionals to identify. And so you might want to like spend some time thinking about where you found it, how maybe measure how tall it is before you're going to know how to tell with confidence what it is. But we could choose something easier. So maybe we should try this one. And I'll tell you, this one I found actually growing in the water of the pond. I'm going to go back to the graphic key, start over. It's not a fern. It's not a grass. It's got a flower. This is where we have to decide if it's a monocot or a dicot. So you can look at the veins and see if it's got veins that look like a monocot or a dicot. You can also look at the flowers and try to tell. That's a good question. You said parallel veins. Does it have parallel veins or not?
Does. I think, yeah, monocot versus dicot, I think parallel veins is usually the first, one of the first things that you look
Yeah,
for
that's right.
to identify.
So we're going to say it's a monocot. And then we have to choose, is it orchid or something else?
Something else.
It's not an orchid. We just, if you know, you know, right? If it's okay, so we're going to use our current location. I told you that I found it standing in water. So this is one you'd pick if part of the plant is always under the water. It's a little hard to know, is it wet or in water? But in this case, it's not just wet, it's actually, part of it was under the water. The light regime was pretty, it's down by the pond. We could say full sun or part sun. I think, I'm not sure which I would, because I wasn't there all day. What do you think? Is the park, would you say the pond is park shape? And then let's skip native and non-native because we may or may not. I mean, I might happen to know, but you might not know. It's flowering right now. Flower color is purple. It says blue.
Yeah.
Would you say it's purple or blue?
It's sort of the purplish.
So botanists are weird about the color blue. A lot of times they call things blue that I would call purple, but we can say purple for now. And then let's just see if that's enough to help us know what we've got. Do we see any good guesses? Yeah, this last one looks a lot like the flowers we've got, doesn't it?
It looked like that.
It did, yeah. And if we might look at some more pictures.
There we go.
I'm feeling real confident now. Look at that, we did it. We identified a plant.
So was that using blue or purple as the color?
Let's see what it said on the, it showed it as purple.
Yeah.
That's it. Would you have picked blue for that, Wick?
Not necessarily, but I always like to watch, you know, if you scroll back up, you can see how many selections you have. So, you know, depending on what you choose, I guess the previous screen, your search result. Yeah.
What's that?
The Alps color they're
can-
using doesn't look purple.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, so,
Like when
yeah.
when you had selected blue, it only showed 2 choices up top. See where it says 6 found there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So that's
So
a
if
good
I
thing to
picked
keep an
blue-
eye on.
Would it have shown me that plant? If I had picked blue, I would have looked at that and just thought, that doesn't
Right.
seem right.
Right.
And then I'd have to go back and guess again. Yeah. So that's why it can be a little annoying sometimes to work with the app, because it's not completely foolproof. There's some subjectivity about where's the
Can you
line
select
between.
more than one?
It's not letting me choose both.
Okay.
Yeah. So you might have to go back and just
But,
reselect.
right, so when you're trying to decide, is it a moist place or is it a wet place, you know, and you look at the number of choices, sometimes that's helpful.
That's
I
a
found.
great,
I mean,
that's a great,
I have trouble using this graphic key a lot of times, but
yeah.
I like to see how many choices I'm left with, and then do I want to wade through all those or make a different choice?
Yeah, if it said at the top like 35, I'd want to narrow my options a little bit more.
Right.
But 6 isn't too many to have to sort through. Oops, I didn't need to go back. I'll go forward. Oh shoot, I guess I have to keep going. Okay, so we said it was monocot, moisture regime, blue, and purple. All right, so we're looking up that pickerel weed. So I'm not actually trained in how to pronounce Latin words, so I just wing it and encourage everybody to do that. Pontidaria cordata. And it does say it's a native plant, so that's good. It's native to Virginia. We could be more specific and see, okay, it's native to Virginia, but maybe not so much in the mountain region, although there is a population here. So I don't feel bad about planting it in my garden because it's like, well, it's not that far away from Rockingham County, and it's probably just that there's not a lot of ponds in the mountains compared to these wetter areas. And this is, as you know, it's a plant that likes to be wet. And then we get to the description. Once again, mid-October is when you can see it, and we can see where it's likely to be found. So this can help you confirm your ID also. If you're reading here and it says, this is an extremely rare plant, you might think, oh, it's probably unlikely that I would have found a rare plant, unless you were like purposefully looking for one. But I can see it's common in places, even though it's rare in the mountains. I also know I'm in an arboretum where people have added stuff. So that just gives us some more details. All right, so I think that's the end of the time that I wanted to talk. I want to give you a chance to ask questions or to practice. If you have the app, you can practice using it for something. Or if you don't have the app, you can ask questions or ask me to look up something for you. How was everybody feeling? Was it fun? Fun? Good. So this handout that I passed around at the beginning is something you can just take home with you. I won't take time now to go over it, but it's just an example of a friend of mine, a fellow plant lover named Judy, who's also learning, like you are, how to use this app. And she decided to use a plant she already knew the identity of, and then spend some time looking up that plant and just like clicking on links to see what else she could learn about it, which is a nice way to get comfortable with the app, especially because you saw how it can be tricky to use it to ID, but it's still a great learning tool even if you don't feel comfortable. If you want to like use your Seek app or picture this or whatever, and then use this app as a supplement, it's a good way to go deeper. It forces you to learn more. And what Judy says in here is that she kind of compares it to other wildflower guides that she has used, like the Seek app, the print book Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, some of you may be familiar with that. And then she just kind of wrote about how she learned about similar look-alike plants that are invasive. So it's just kind of a fun activity. Well, thank you so much for your time. Do you have questions? Yes?
No, I had something I wanted to mention if people here are not familiar. If you don't have the app, if you go online, you can go to the digital atlas of Virginia, Flora, and get a lot of the same information. You can search by county, you can search by
I'm so glad you
plant
mentioned that.
name, you can kind of pull it up. Is it vaatlas.org or something like that?
That's
But it has
right.
all the range maps. So if you know the plant name, you can look it up, see where it's native in the state, or whether it's not native.
If
So
you want to
can get
save
those range maps.
$20.
And I use it all the time. I want to see if the plant
Yeah, if you don't
grows-
want to
grows in
spend
this area.
$20, but you want that information,
And it's done by the same people. We did the Flora and we do this.
okay, thank you. Got my husband a lot for texting.
What's the, I think it's vaatlas.org or something. If you,
So vaplantatlas.org.
there it is right there. So you can search by common and scientific name. You can look at lists of, genus or family or location or, pull up a whole list of everything that's found in Rockingham County and then click on one and see whether it's native or not. See what the range is, whether it's statewide or just local.
I'm
It's
really
really
glad you
cool.
mentioned that. Yeah, so if you're not sure you want to invest $20 and you just want to give it, a few months, you can use this website for free. And I used to use that, and then I decided it was more convenient to have it on my phone.
I started out with the paper book version of the atlas.
This one?
No, not the, there's a paper version of just all the maps,
There is.
before they did the online version.
Oh,
It's just a booklet, and you look up the plant name, and it shows you the range map for Virginia.
awesome. So that's the second hit, VA plan. Okay, thanks. So you have to do the right thing. So if you know the scientific name, you have to put it in that box. And if you know the common name, you have to put it in the common name box. That's a little different from the app. But we could put in Virgina search. And then we have to figure out which one we found, and I think it was this one. And there's our range map.
A lot of them do have pictures, that particular one doesn't,
Yeah.
obviously, but
So there's not quite as much detail on the website as on the app, but you can at least get those range maps. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best in advance. You're welcome to stick around if you have questions or if you want to try to identify anything. Otherwise, feel free to be in touch by emailing Shenandoah Chapter at gmail.com.